That's good. And everyone can see see the screen? The
Yes.
presentation? Okay. Thank you again. My name is Jim Curran. I'm the Financial Know-How Program Manager for Cape Cod 5. I love doing these presentations. It is the highlight of my day. Kimberly says the same thing. And Deanna has been a joy to work with. We really have enjoyed, and we've gotten feedback, one-off feedback, a lot of participants reaching out to friends of theirs at the bank saying that they got something out of it, and it really means a lot to us. So obviously, you know that we're a community bank. One of our tenets is the advancement of financial know-how, which is why we advocate so importantly to do this. My colleague today, who will be doing the majority of the presentation, is Kimberly Williams. Kimberly is a Senior Wealth Management Officer at Cape Cod 5. She has decades of experience in trust and asset management, portfolio management. The reason we invited Kimberly to join us today is very specifically, Deanna asked us to talk about long-term saving, long-term investing. So what we're going to share with you are some different vehicles that you can use toward that, some ideas about how you may want to prioritize what you target first. There's a lot of information here. So what we encourage you to do is pick out 2 or 3 things that you think are appealing to you, grab a hold of those and maybe learn more about those, see if we can help you out with that. The other thing to remind yourself of throughout this is that Kimberly is going to be talking about big pieces of time, big goals. So when we talk about 6 months worth of emergency savings, when we talk about being able to pay for college tuition for retirement, these are goals that take years. And so when we talk, we want you to understand that that's the angle from which we are coming. Not that it is easy, but that it is a long-term goal, something worthy of being a long-term goal, and worth being broken down into smaller mileposts, by automating your savings, et cetera, that can help you get there. So with that, I am going to hand it over to my colleague, Kimberly, and we look forward to questions at the end of the presentation.
Great, thanks, Jim. In case you can't tell, that picture he had on the screen was my pre-pandemic picture. This is my current look, my authentic self. So good evening, everybody, and thanks for joining us tonight. With all of the amazing and readily available content that's out there, like cooking shows and art and history lectures, we are really, really impressed that you've all made a choice to be with us tonight to talk about saving. And hopefully a few of you might have a glass of wine or a beer with you right now to take it all in. This is a really big step. It's not the most alluring topic, but over the long term, it can be really satisfying. Saving is a passion for me, and so I'm really excited to talk about this tonight. Saving doesn't really come naturally to most of us. When Jim and I were getting ready for this presentation, we compared our savings habits from when we were in grade school. My mother offered to match any amount of money that I would put in the bank from birthday gifts and babysitting, and she would match it 100% dollar for dollar. I used to ride my bike to the bank with my passbook to have the interest posted because I couldn't wait to see it in there. Jim told me that when he had a few dollars come his way, he couldn't wait to get to the candy store fast enough so he could empty his pockets and fill his tummy. Saving shouldn't be an all or nothing proposition. I probably missed out on a little fun over the years, and Jim probably had to sacrifice a little bit to make up for lost time from spending all that money on candy. But balance and moderation are key things in life, and included in that is saving. You are all at very different stages in your lives right now with different life experiences and financial demands. So we're going to cover some general topics, and I want you to think of those as long-term goals, as Jim said. You can't accomplish it all at once. No one can tackle all the areas that we're going to cover at the same time. Honestly, it would be discouraging. And no matter where you are On the savings spectrum, you can make small changes that will make a big difference. So remember that. So we're going to share some high-level summaries about a number of savings goals and vehicles that are a pathway to meet them. And we realize your first question is, Kimberly, where is this money coming from that I'm going to put in these receptacles? You know, in today's society, you are bombarded on a daily basis with advertisements trying to part you from your money on TV, radio, your phone, and just about every website you visit. It's so easy. You're just one click away from spending, and sometimes you aren't even aware of what you're spending money on. So only you can identify your superfluous spending in looking at your own spending habits. But why don't you take a look at 1 week in your spending? Are you buying individual bottles of water every day? Maybe you could buy a case and grab one on your way out the door, or get a refillable bottle and save the landfill, all those plastic bottles. Do you eat breakfast or lunch out every day? Just cutting out one $15 lunch a week could add up to $800 a year. Maybe you get a pizza every weekend. You could buy your pizza at the supermarket and maybe save $10 a week. That's $500. So altogether with lunch and that pizza, that's $1,300 a year. So almost $100 a month. Have you looked at your cable bill lately? Maybe you signed up for a subscription that you forgot about and you're not even using it, or maybe you could reduce your cable service. Maybe think about an energy audit, you know, just saving money on your heat or electricity can put money into your pocket. Look around the house and see if you have anything you don't need anymore. Maybe you can sell it on one of those online virtual yard sales. You know, one man's trash is another man's treasure. Talk to your friends about what they're doing. Do you have a credit card that gives you cash back? If you don't, think about changing to one. And if you don't go out and spend extra money to get the cash back, but if you put your everyday expenses on the card and you get $25 extra back at the end of the month, maybe you could move that into the emergency fund that Jim mentioned. Do you have a mortgage? You know, we're still experiencing some of the lowest mortgage rates in history. And if you hadn't refinanced, consider exploring refinancing your mortgage. Even saving $100 a month would be $1,200 a year. Did you receive a stimulus check? Do you receive tax refunds? Consider keeping a portion for yourself and maybe putting a portion in the emergency fund or some of the vehicles that we're going to talk about in a little while. And once those funds are off your radar, that's when they have a chance to grow. So just as Jim and I had different savings habits, so do most couples. Try to sit down together, if you're married or with someone, and look over your outflows. Write everything down that you're spending for a week. And don't get defensive. Make it a game. Take small bites out of the spending to start, and talk about purchases before you make them, even the small ones. And then celebrate your milestones. It really feels good when you start to see some savings grow in your account. So let's get to the meat of the matter. Let's move to the next slide if we could. So here are some short and long-term savings goals. The first one is one we've mentioned a few times. You know, with the pandemic hitting us, businesses slammed on the brakes, and many people we know felt like they had been hit head on by a freight train because businesses just stopped. And so having 6 months worth of living expenses in the bank is helpful when the unthinkable happens. But that's not a small amount. So no one can just all of a sudden open an account and put 6 months worth of your very basic living expenses there. But if you can start to chip away at it and move a little bit in, perhaps have an automatic payment from your checking account into a savings account, pay that account first, $50 a month. You know, some of the ways we talked about saving, you could move some of those funds in. You know, maybe it's in an account at a bank that you don't look at all the time. But should the unthinkable happen, having a little bit of a cushion makes the panic a little less intense. Then you might want to think about a rainy day fund for unplanned expenses. So things like car repairs or unreimbursed medical expenses. That's another account that you could think about putting a little bit in at a time when you come up with a little bit extra. Think about paying off some debt. If you have a balance on your credit card, try to pay just a little more than the minimum. Maybe you could use that cash back we talked about to reduce the balance. $1 of interest saved is $1 earned. And then we'd like to talk about saving for retirement. For some of us, it's closer than for others, but there are work plans out there, and that's going to be one of the first big topics that we're going to talk about. Perhaps you have a major purchase you'd like to save for, a car, a home, vacation, a wedding. We're all anxious to get out and do stuff after the pandemic. You know, some of us here might remember Christmas clubs when you put a little bit in the bank every single week, and then by the time Christmas came, you saved up for it. And after all my saving in high school, I was able to go on a junior year abroad program. And, you know, I'll never forget that. So all that saving was worthwhile by the time I got into college. Education is one of the biggest expenses that we'll face in addition to retirement for many of us. So if you have young children or you have grandchildren on the way, we're going to talk about one way you might think about paying or planning to pay for those expenses. The one vehicle we'll talk about today is something called a 529 plan. And then the last savings goal that we want to talk about is kind of some nifty ways where you can tuck money away for unreimbursed medical expenses, either now or down the road. So now, if we could, maybe Jim, we could turn to saving for retirement. Thank you. So this first slide, now don't try to, you might not even be able to see this very well, and don't try to study it. And it's actually a little bit daunting when you realize what it's showing you. But the impression we'd like to make from this slide, what it's trying to tell you is at the bottom of the slide are various ages. So 20 years old on the left, 60 years old on the right. And what it's saying is, if you'd like to have $1 million in the bank at age 65, if you start saving when you're 20 and put it into a vehicle that earns 6%, you would need to save $361 a month, or about $90 a week. And as your time horizon gets shorter, you'd actually have to save more and more and more on a monthly basis in order to get to that $1 million. Now, if you go all the way to the right at age 60, you're only 5 years away from age 65. This chart is suggesting you save $14,000 a month. And most people would say, if I had $14,000 a month to save, I could live on $14,000 a month. So we really just want to make the point that the sooner you start saving, the better off you'll be in the long run. And if you haven't, you know, everybody is different. We still say these little incremental savings that you do can still make a big difference in your life down the road. So now, Jim, if you could go to the next page. Thank you so much. This is a really, I think, probably one of the most important topics that we're going to talk about today. If you are working for an employer that has an employer-sponsored plan, and you might have, maybe some of you are participating in them, and if you are, great. And if you're not, you might have access to something called a 401k plan or a 403b plan or a 457. I'm going to explain those a little more on the next slide. What we want to tell you about here is that there are many benefits to participating in your employer-sponsored plan if you can. And these plans are intended to help you save for retirement. So the first benefit is that you are able to use pre-tax dollars. So before they come to you and you have all those taxes withheld, you can have money taken right off the top of your salary and have it go right into these employer-sponsored plans. So a $5,000 savings may only cost you $4,000 because you save on the taxes. But I'm going to give you kind of a more concrete example that hopefully will kind of bring the point home about why you should really consider these plans. If your employer has a match, in other words, if you put a little in, they'll also put a little bit in, then it's really, really important to try to take advantage of that, because it's almost like free money from your employer. So let's say, for example, you have a $40,000 a year salary, and your employer says, we will match up to 3% of your salary. That's $1,200. So what they're saying is, if you put in $1,200, we'll put in $1,200. That's $100 per month that you would have withdrawn directly from your paycheck. Now think about it. Assume you didn't participate and you decided to take that $100 in your paycheck, and you're in a 25% tax bracket. So you have to pay 25% to the state and to the federal government. So that $100 a month that you might save, by the time it gets to you, if you take it in your salary, you only receive $75 because you pay 25% in taxes. That's okay. You might say, well, I'm going to save it anyway. I'll take that $75 and I'll go over to the bank and I'll put it in the bank. So over the course of the year, that would come up to $900 that you would save after taxes. But if you decide to participate in your plan, have that $100 a month taken out of your paycheck, you don't even see it. It's automated. That's one of the benefits. It goes right into the savings plan. And then your employer puts $100 in. So now there's $200 in your savings account. And guess what? It only costs you $75 to put $200 in that savings account. So over the course of the year, you would have received $900 that you could have put in the bank. But at the end of that year, thanks to you and your employer, you would have $2,400 in that savings account. So you get an automatic 100% return on your $100 by having your employer put the $100 in as well. So
Kimberly, can I interrupt you for 1 sec?
Sure.
All of these, the members that have signed in are, they have a mandatory state retirement or contributory retirement.
Okay.
And 457 plans.
Okay.
And the employers are not, at least to my knowledge, none of the public employers are matching any of their funds. So,
Okay.
but there are some spouses that are on here too that could.
That's what I was going to say.
Yes.
There might be some spouses in there. So, I mean, and one of the benefits is anything you can contribute, you do contribute with pre-tax dollars. So that is helpful right, then and there.
Right.
And by being able to contribute on a regular basis, you're investing in the market in a way that's called dollar cost averaging. And so that means you're putting a little bit in over the course of the year. And so if you're going into stocks, you're buying at all different times of the market, and you're not trying to time the market and make an investment when the market is low. You're just completely agnostic to what's happening out there. Now, investment options, there are a myriad of them, and that could be a whole nother discussion. So we won't even go into that about all of the different options and what might resonate with you or what would be a good option for you. But it is any kind of plans like this always have really high quality investment options. And often the websites will give you great tools for planning. And in addition to that, very often, although we don't recommend it, if you have an emergency, you are allowed to borrow from your plan. So it's something to consider. And then you pay yourself back from your paycheck. So thank you. So basically, Deanna, you were saying then what a lot of people here participate in is that third one, a 457 plan.
Yeah, they have the mandatory contributory retirement.
Okay.
And then the option of contributing to the 457s.
Okay. All right. So if you have the ability to put a little bit in on your own, it still is pre-tax dollars. So it would be great, if you can think about doing
Absolutely.
that. These other plans, a 401k, typically that's offered by a for-profit corporation, and a 403b is usually a nonprofit or school employees.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but they all work in a very similar way that you're able to contribute pre-tax dollars. And some of the levels might not be exactly the same, but they're all pretty close. So with a 401k, the maximum you can put in any 1 year is $19,500. If you're over 50, you can put in $6,500. That's a lot, $26,000 for someone to be able to do that. But if you can start off small, that $100 a month, at the end of the year, that adds up over time because it's invested for you. And the other benefit is those investments grow tax-free. So if you have money in the bank and you earn interest, you have to report that to the government every year and pay taxes on it. If it's in a 457 plan and it grows, that interest grows and grows and grows, and you don't pay taxes all along the way. Of course, the government, doesn't give you an entirely free lunch. Eventually, you are required to withdraw funds. And so now the required age at which you have to withdraw is 72. And you need to take out at that point in time what's called a required minimum distribution. And there's a formula for that. And every year you need to make a withdrawal and pay taxes on the money that you take out at that time. So the thought process there on the part of the IRS is we really want to encourage people to save for their retirement. And so while you do it, we let you put it in and not pay taxes on it. We let it grow tax-free. And then when you do get to retirement, we want you to use it. And their formula is that each year you take a little bit out. And by the time you get to your technical life expectancy, which they have in a table when they think you're going to leave this world, you will have exhausted your fund. I will tell you, most people are living far beyond that life expectancy table. You are allowed to take it out sooner without a penalty. You can take funds out at 59 and a half and not pay a penalty for early withdrawal. You would just pay regular income taxes. And again, all plans have their own nuances. So, you would absolutely need to check with your own plan. And then sometimes what people do is when they retire, they may leave it in the plan, or they might have the option to roll it over into an individual retirement account, which we're going to talk about next. So there we are at IRAs. Mm-hmm. So another way that you can save for your retirement on your own, not an employer-sponsored plan, and you may have heard of an IRA, an individual retirement account. These came out in the early 80s. You used to be able to put $2,000 a year in, and you could get a tax deduction on your taxes for saving. So in a way, it's like pre-tax dollars. It just works a little bit differently. You're in control of this. You go to a bank or an investment advisor, and you actually open up a traditional IRA, which I'll tell you what that is, or a Roth IRA, and then you literally make the contribution yourself, or you can have a withdrawal from your checking account on a regular basis if you'd like to. And you can also make a contribution the year following the calendar year. So for instance, you can make a contribution for 2020, last year, all the way up to April 15th of this year, and still get a deduction on your taxes. So what happens is it doesn't come right off the top from your salary, but if you earn $65,000 or less, you can have a traditional IRA, deposit up to $6,000 if you're working into that account, and then you tell your accountant that you've made that contribution, and they will give you a tax deduction on your taxes for it. If you're over 50, you can actually put in $7,000. So what happens with this, though, is you get that tax deduction, but again, at age 72, you're forced to take the funds out, and you'll pay taxes on it at that time because you receive that tax deduction. A Roth IRA works a little differently. You don't get a deduction for it, and there are some income limits on that. You can only make a contribution if you're earning less than a certain amount, and forgive me, I don't have that at my fingertips right now. But the benefits of a Roth are that you can make contributions. Those funds grow tax-free for the rest of your life. And if you don't need the funds at retirement, you aren't forced to take them out and pay taxes that you might not want to pay. There's one thing I'd like to say about Roth IRAs that I think is really, really important. And that is, if you have children or grandchildren who are working, college students, even kids in high school, if they are getting W-2 wages, they can open a Roth IRA. And I highly, highly, highly encourage you to encourage them to start saving early, because for a young person, a Roth IRA is like gold. They won't miss the small contributions that they make over time. Remember that $360 a month at age 20? They could start putting that in, and by the time they start working, $360 a month, it won't be a lot to them 20 years from now. So they could continue to put that in. By the time they're 65, there'll be $1 million in that account, and they can use it if they want, but they don't have to. For many people, that retirement fund grows, and then you're forced to take the funds out when you might not need it. Most people do, but you might not need it all, and you might not want to have to pay those taxes. So the benefits are, as I said, over the period of time that you put money into either a Roth or a traditional, the funds grow tax-free. If one spouse is working and contributes to an IRA, you can open up a second one for the non-working spouse and make contribution. There are all kinds of investments. You can keep it really safe and put it in the bank and buy a CD, or you can explore all kinds of other investment options, which, as I said, lots of things to look at. And so that kind of covers the IRA topic.
Can I ask
And
you a
so why
question,
don't we
Kimberly?
move on to college?
Kimberly, we have a question. Can I interrupt you?
Oh,
I'm
sure.
sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'll go backwards on this one. The question is, Roth is not just education?
Right. Roth is for anything.
That's
We're about to talk about a specific vehicle for education, but a Roth IRA is strictly for really retirement, for anything you want to use it for.
okay.
And that's why it's so great for kids, because they forget that they've even put some money into it, and if they get into the regular habit, that summer job, put a little bit into the Roth, and they'll really start to see it grow. And we're really starting to see young people get interested in investing. There are all kinds of
That's
tools
true.
for
They
that.
really do.
So it's a great way to learn about it. So the answer is Roths are not just for education.
Okay. And then the second question we had, which actually was the first question, sorry about that. If you are over 50 and have a 403B, how much can you put in?
If you are over 50 and have a 403B, you can put in 26,000.
Okay.
I believe. So it's 19,500 plus the extra over 50 contribution.
Okay, great.
And
Thank you.
You can confirm that with your plan administrator, but I'm 99% sure that's the amount you can contribute.
Great, thanks.
Education is a huge expense. We all know it's daunting. There's another way that the IRS has allowed people to save money, and the biggest benefit of something called a 529 plan. These are all IRS numbers that they assign to these different plans. One of the benefits of contributing to a 529 plan is the same thing as a Roth IRA, a traditional IRA, a 403B. Anything you put in grows tax-free until you use it. So a parent can open a 529 for their baby and put money in every year and encourage other family members to put money in, and it'll grow tax-free. A grandparent can open a 529 and put money in and invest it, and it will grow tax-free. But the real benefit is when you take it out and pay tuitions with it, it is 100% withdrawn tax-free. There are many, many different variations of 529 plans and college savings plans, and there are even some college savings plans where contribution might give you a state tax benefit. There are no federal tax benefits for contributing to these. But really, the biggest benefit is that your contributions can grow tax-free over the lifetime of the child. And the IRS has expanded the use of these plans. They can be used for private school tuition and even preschool expenses now.
Wow.
So I think that's, I think we covered that pretty well.
We did. I just want to add, I am living that college tuition life right now. And if anyone here has any children or expecting children or grandchildren, I cannot emphasize enough. I wish I had done more. And financial aid was non-existent for us, which floored me as well too. So it's quite a burden, and it's a very daunting one when you first hit it. So I'm living that dream.
And and we're all aware of, young families, they have a lot of pressure on them. So it's really easy for us to say, oh, open a 529 plan. So as we said, you could never do all of these things all at once.
Right.
Save for 6 months of expenses and save for a vacation and put money in retirement at 529. But it is a vehicle, and very often grandparents like to contribute to those in their retirement if they're able to. Quick chat here about micro investing. I just wanted to mention it. It's kind of a new theme that's coming about out in the world. And remember, I said society likes to part you from your money easily by letting you click and spend. Well, this is something new that's come about that allows you to click and save. And so there are all kinds of apps out there. A really well-known one is Acorns, from little acorns, big oaks grow. And how these work are you open or have this app, the Acorns app, and when you buy something, the app rounds that purchase up to the next dollar. So it might only be 50 cents, but it automatically deposits that 50 cents into this investment account, and it goes into the stock market. And over time, all these small incremental purchases move the money over into the savings account. You don't even really notice it. It's just, it's like, it doesn't even register with you that it's happening. But over time, it can really grow with multiple purchases. And this is a great thing to mention to the youngsters out there, because they're on their phones all the time doing things. And so they like the idea of the ease of savings and the ease of putting money into investments. So something to be aware of. So, if anyone, this comes up in conversation, you can talk about these things, being available to people. And the last thing we're going to talk about today are health savings accounts. And pretty much everything we've talked about today really focuses on the ability to put funds into vehicles with pre-tax dollars and then have them grow without paying taxes as they grow. Not every employer has a health savings account. Deanna, I don't know if that's something that would be available.
They are available, yes.
They are available. Okay, that's great.
And it's open enrollment time now for anyone that is considering it, so.
Well, it's a worthwhile thing to think about, because what happens with a health savings account is it's created by your employer. The withdrawals come out pre-tax, just like a contribution to a 457. Money goes into the savings account. It's invested. It can be in something very safe. It can be in other options. I don't know what the options are, with your vehicle, but I know for us, we can put money into the stock market if we want to. So those funds can be invested. They can be used right away if you'd like to use them. Very often you'll get like a debit card, and you can make withdrawals from that account for qualified medical expenses, like co-payments or prescriptions, things like that, dental expenses that aren't covered by insurance. Or if you're able to handle all of those expenses with your salary or savings, you can actually let this account grow. Right. And it can grow during your lifetime, and you can have it there in retirement to cover things like supplemental Medicare premiums, or nursing home expenses, or dental expenses down the road. Or if you don't need it for those expenses and you're over 65, you actually can have treated this as just another savings account, right. Make withdrawals, but you'll just pay ordinary income taxes on it if you don't use it for medical expenses. Right. And the annual contribution limit right now is $3,600 per person. So another great thing to think about. So that kind of brings us to the end of all the things that we wanted to talk about today. Hopefully you might have picked up one or two little nuggets that you can think about or explore further, or if some question comes to you afterwards, feel free to send it over to Deanna. We would be happy to get back to you. But I think one thing I did just want to say is, I think you might have heard the expression, pick your hard. This is something I just heard recently, but if you are thinking about, living a healthy lifestyle. You know, you need to exercise regularly and eat healthily, and it's not a lot of fun. It's actually kind of hard. And so you could do that, or you could not do it, but down the road later in life, you know, you might have some heart issues or diabetes, and that's hard. So, you know, pick your heart. You can be healthy now, or, you know, deal with not being so healthy down the road. And it's the same thing with saving. It's not always a lot of fun. It's kind of hard. It takes an effort, but if you do it, you'll really feel good about it as time goes on when you do those little bits along the way. It'll save you from panic time and in troubled times, or down the road in retirement, because you can't borrow for retirement. You can borrow to buy a house or borrow to buy a car, but when you retire, you can't go to the bank and say, I need money to retire. Can you give me a loan? And so try to plan now for the future. So that's a wrap for me. Thank you so much.
Kimberly, I have a question here. Do you have a preference, IRA versus 403B?
Oh, well, you know, I usually like the employer-sponsored plans, because very often you get that match. But I like those employer-sponsored plans because of the automation as well. You know, it absolutely comes right off the top of your salary. It goes right into the account. Those funds that you put in are not subject to taxes. And so you get that benefit right away. The IRA, you have to make a conscious choice. If you're making over a certain amount of money, it might not be tax deductible, so that you might be using after-tax dollars. So I would start with the employer-sponsored plan.
Okay. There's a couple questions here. I know that I can answer this. Can you have an HSA if you have a flexible spending account? What is the difference between a health savings account and a flex spending account? They're two separate things. Your health savings account is your health insurance, and your flex spending is your limited out-of-pocket healthcare expenses. Our high deductible health spending accounts are one product, if that makes sense to people. Jim or Kimberly, do you want to add any more specificity to that?
I think.
Go ahead, Jim.
Thank you. The flexible spending account, the big thing with that is that you're getting money pre-tax to spend on medical expenses in that particular year.
Right.
And you have to use it by the end of that year, or you lose it.
Yeah.
With an HSA, as long as you have a high deductible health plan, you are eligible, you can save that money pre-tax and use it for medical expenses in that year, but you don't lose it. You can build a balance, and once your balance hits a threshold, I know for some companies it's 1,000, for us it's 2,000. Once you hit that, you can start investing after that as well. And when you take the money out at the end, that's tax-free as well. So the HSA, as long as you have a high deductible health plan, the HSA is the way to go, because it just gives you more flexibility and more options. If you don't have a high deductible plan, go ahead and use the flexible spending. Just make sure you don't put away so much that you lose it at the end of the year. Did I get it right, Kimberly?
Yes, perfect. And one extra thing, which I am not an expert on, if someone asked if you're over 65, if you are over 65 and using Medicare,
you cannot.
Yeah.
You cannot. You can't have a high deductible plan. They're not offered for any of our Medicare population.
One more thing to add for an HSA is the reason I love it, and the reason so many people in Kimberly's world love it, is that it kind of acts in two roles. A, it's an emergency fund. You know, there are those of us, and I've done this in the past, where I don't go to the doctor, I don't go to the dentist because I can't afford it. This allows you to have a way where you are saving tax-free to make sure you always take care of yourself. So that is an emergency fund to take care of your health needs. It is also a retirement fund, because you can invest long-term and have that money for health costs in retirement. So it can act in both roles. So it's a neat product in that way.
Right, and Jim and Kimberly, I know you had this in the slides, but I'm not sure if everyone on this meeting heard this, but you can use this if you have this account and you go into retirement, you can use this for your health insurance premiums, to pay your health insurance premiums.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Nursing aides, like
Yep.
anything.
Okay. Anyone have any other questions?
C1 is the HSA recommended for people over 45. I would recommend it for anyone. It's a great vehicle because I think we all have unreimbursed medical expenses, and they've expanded, what you can use it for. But those contributions come out pre-tax, so it is a great. It's really like a 401k only for health expenses
Right.
or savings.
It's a
So
win-win
yes,
for anyone.
if you've done all of your other things, I would suggest absolutely doing this at any age.
Right, and I could just add to that the younger that you are, this is just by luck of the draw. Most of the time, the less that you're spending on health insurance costs. So it is a savings account. So that when you need it, when we get a little bit older and our knee hurts and you have to go get an MRI or whatever it may be, you'll have that flexibility. You'll have your health plan and you'll have this account for that. And definitely if you're 45 and older as well.
And while we're waiting for another question, if I can reemphasize something Kimberly said earlier, if you've got kids, grandkids that are working, Roth IRA, Roth IRA, Roth IRA, because remember, you're paying after-tax money, but most kids in high school probably aren't paying taxes. If they're only making $5,000, $6,000 a year, that's the lowest they're ever going to pay in taxes. They're probably paying nothing, even up into their teens. So you're taking money that wasn't taxed, letting it grow for 50 years without being taxed, and then you can take it out in retirement without being taxed.
Right.
So that's just so much growth on top of growth.
Okay, so and there's a couple questions here with who to contact. So you need to talk to your benefits person in your town or your school district. And Marcia, I'm not sure if it's Marcia from Barnstable. And I know Christine, you'll be contacting Laura Scroggins in the HR office, and she will tell you which plans offer the high deductible if the town offers them. And that's who you would sign up with, sorry. All right.
If I can say one more thing.
Of course.
No matter what it is that appealed to you today, if it's saving for college, if it's paying off debt, if it's emergency funds, HSA, Roth IRA, whatever it is, pick one, get yourself started, pick a small dollar amount. Don't think that you need to max everything out first year in. Pick $50 a month because it's the habit, it's the behavior. Pick it and then automate it. Any bank, any investment house is going to allow you to set up an automatic withdrawal every month. And if you can get it going like that with a dollar amount you're not going to miss, that is really, if there's one behavior we could ask you to take away, there's 15 programs you can choose from, but it's all going to come with the same behavior of picking one, pick a small amount that you know you can afford, and then automate it so that it just becomes another bill that you pay every month.
Right. Jim, we just had a question about, will the 529 plan affect your financial aid? And it will not. It is there for when I failed to get any financial aid to fall back on.
It is taken into consideration.
Yeah.
And this gets a little technical. I'll give you kind of an overview, but it's something that you definitely need to read a little bit more about, and maybe even, talk to schools when you're filling out that FAFSA form. So if a grandparent is the owner of a 529 plan and they put money in, when the child takes it out for tuition, it actually is treated as income to the child. And so a lot of people do some sort of little timing things where they don't use the 529 funds until the child's junior year, because then it doesn't get picked up as income to the child until their senior year. So it will only count against the child for 1 year. But I believe that 50% of a child's income is taken into consideration relative to financial aid. Now, these are not usually huge dollars, and kids don't usually have that much. If a parent is the owner of the 529 plan, it is listed on the financial aid form as an asset, but my understanding that only about 5% of parents' assets are taken into consideration for financial aid. So we think the benefit of that tax-free growth and that regular contributing and having something there and available to use when the time comes kind of outweighs the kind of minimal impact it will have on financial aid. We actually have a great little handout on that, which I might be able to share, Jim. You'll have to let me know if I can.
Yeah, share it with
things
me.
up.
I'll share it with Deanna. Yeah.
Okay, great.
During the trial weighs on people. It's disheartening.
Good questions, everybody. You're really thinking.
Anxiety, depression. People have gone
I know. And we had a question about pulling out from apps and things like that. You know, Nancy, why don't I email you? I'll talk with Jim and Kimberly afterwards about that, if there's something that they would suggest, or if you want to address it now. Pull out from accounts and automatic payments to subscriptions, apps, et cetera, that we may forget about.
Yeah, that's a great place to start. When we talk about where can you find that extra $50 a month, $100 a month, notice what's just being charged to your card every month that you signed up for 2 years ago that you don't use anymore. You know,
I'll
Netflix
give you an
accounts, gym
example.
accounts. Yeah.
I signed up for BritBox because I wanted to watch some British show, and I said, oh, I'll sign up for it, watch it, and cancel it. I forgot. So I was charged for like a year for a subscription that I thought I was only going to use for 1 month. So that's why I put that on the list, because I did it myself.
Right. It's easy to do with all the apps that are out here now. So, okay. We got a lot of thanks. Thanks everyone for joining. I think, Jim, you're still in charge. You have to give me information back.
Okay.
Permission back to do this. Awesome. Guys, thank you all. Thanks everybody.
Yeah, thanks for coming. You are all to be commended. Congratulations for thinking about this important topic.
I know our next workshop is not going to be as fun of a topic, if you consider this fun. This makes me nervous because there's a college in it, right? But the next workshop that we'll be doing will be on like estate planning, end of life, those
Really important stuff.
And they are really, really important.
Yes.
And you know,
everybody come back for that.
Right. And some of what we're talking about here, we'll go into that, because I mean, we'll still talk about our health savings accounts and how those can be applicable towards the latter part of our life and things like that. But this was just fantastic. I really appreciate. Thank you, Kimberly and Jim. Jim, you always put together a great product for us. I'm so impressed. I went by your building the other day and looked at it longingly, the new building down there, and said, oh, maybe someday we'll actually get to be in there and do one of those there. We'll still do our remote portion, but anybody that might like to join us, wouldn't that be fantastic? So
great.
all right, guys. Well, thank you all. And